Hello, fantastic to see you, and thanks very much for the great feedback on last week's video. This week I'm going to give you 5 simple rules to improve your composition. We're going to start off with the rule of thirds, which is about dividing your image both vertically and horizontally into thirds, and then placing your subject of the image at the intersection of one of those points. So here, a third of the way down the picture and a third of the way across the picture, you have this dinghy looking in towards this beautiful sunset in Bali. Here is a similar image, similar compositional image in Yellowstone, where the trees along a jetty are positioned about a third of the way into the image. It's a little bit further down than a third, it's closer towards half, but it gives, it draws your eye into the subject of the image. You can do this with in landscape photography, but also in portrait photography. And here's a picture of a model taken fairly recently, where just by placing her a little bit over to one side of the image, you have a lot of negative space behind her, which draws you into looking at her face. And you can do this in use this in lots of different ways. Here, in a Bedouin tent in Muscat, we were presented with tea and dates, and here you see that the teapot is about a third of the way in, and actually there's a relationship between the presentation here and the earthenware that they have at the back of the image. So the first one, rule of thirds, very simple compositional tool. Try and use it to enhance your composition. The second one is around perspective. We tend to take pictures at eye level because we're standing, and what I want to show you is that you can make some very impactful changes to your composition by simply changing your perspective, by shooting higher or by shooting lower. And here I was in Loo in Cornwall, and there were these 3 gig rowing boats, 8 people rowing boats, and here I took this picture at head height, looking down into the boats. It's an okay image, but nothing special. I then moved down a little bit. Luckily the sun had come out and started giving us lovely shadows of the boats, but again, an okay image, but nothing special. Much better when I got below the level of the boats, and by dropping down to nearly on the ground, the image is much stronger. So you can improve the quality of your images just by moving around and changing the angle at which you're photographing something. So use perspective, consider that when you are shooting. The third compositional tool is leading lines to bring your eye through the photograph from where you're standing. You can do it in a fairly simplistic way, such as we've got here, where the lines of the boardwalk draw you into a vanishing point towards the end of the pier. In Penarth, you want to walk down that image towards the end of the pier. Here, I've taken this at eye level, and I've used a symmetrical composition such that it has a natural balance in the image. And you can use leading lines in lots of different ways. As I say, this is a fairly simple approach. Here we again have a vanishing point. This is a metro station in Washington DC, and it draws you through into the central point of this image. Leading lines don't have to be straight, and here we have a wavy walkway that draws you through this image. And they don't have to be lines at all. Here you've got two yachts that sort of create a line through the centre of this picture, through to the beautiful reflections at sunrise of the masts of these yachts, and it draws you through the picture. The fourth compositional tool is either to be very close to a subject or to back away. It's a cliche in photography that if you don't get a good picture, you're not close enough, and that works well for lots and lots of different circumstances, particularly around photographing people and often inanimate objects. So here we've got some rocks, pebbles on a beach, and I've shot very close to get in so that you're drawn into the detail of the rocks and also of the pattern left by the water through the beach. Here, the whitewash of the walls in this village in southern Spain and the terracotta roof tiles makes you wonder what it must be like to live in those houses, to get drawn into the lives of the people who live there. This is a much stronger composition than the wide image that I took of the entire village. While getting close works really well for many subjects, sometimes you need to be able to let an item breathe. This is taken in Monument Valley, and while you have some nice reflections and beautiful light on the rock formation on the right hand side, there is just not enough breathing room at the top of the image to make it effective. Taken the same day and with a wider perspective, this massive rock formation is made to is given power by the extra space that you have above it. So although it's great to close into a subject, sometimes it's better just to give it a little bit more breathing space. Here's an example of some beach huts in Southwold, very close and tight crop, which really hasn't worked for the image, whereas the same beach hut taken in a different perspective and given more space within the image is a much more powerful picture. The final thing I want to talk about is repeating lines and using reflection. And if you can find repeating lines or patterns in a subject, it becomes a much more powerful image. And here you've got a fantastic reflection of the Arts and Science park in Valencia, where the reflection has really made the image into something rather that looks like, I call this a big fish. It looks like a fish with its tail going off here. There is something attractive about reflections which draw you further into a picture. This is a picture taken at the Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi, and it combines a bunch of the compositional tools I've been already talking about. Here you've got leading lines into the center of the image. You also have repeating patterns as the archways draw you through the picture. Also the repeating columns, particularly emphasized by the gold supports here. This draws you through the picture. Some beautiful pastel beach huts in Felixstowe, if I remember rightly. You can see that we have these repeating shapes that go through the picture, which are sort of reflected or echoed by the shadows, and that draws you through the picture. We've used this in this concept of repeating patterns in this image, where the model is reflected in a mirror image. He was standing in front of a mirror and I am in there. There is a line coming down here which draws you across the image. Those repeating patterns are interesting and useful compositional tool. Here, the very famous Lombard Street, where the cars drive down this sort of combination of switchbacks, have obviously leading lines through the image, and the weight of the cars, which have got to a point where they're nicely separated through the image, provides a pleasing sight. And the final picture I want to show you today is St Michael's Mount in Cornwall. Very popular photography spot. This walkway is well photographed. However, here I've used leading lines through to the subject, which is St Michael's Mount itself. Here you'll see that, of course, it's on the third, so you have balance of rule of thirds, and you can also see that you have this triangular shape of the walkway, which is also echoed in the triangle of St Michael Mount itself. So 5 simple compositional tools. I hope you found this useful. If you like what you see, please consider subscribing. I hope to be back next week with a video talking about editing a particular image, which will focus on some of the simple editing tools that you can find in most photography darkrooms. Thank you very much for looking in, and see you again. Bye bye.